Jonathan Katz is a professional world-class dog trainer, leader in Protection Sports Association, and a breeder of Malinois for 15 years. In fact, my personal dog Ari that has been recognized on my YouTube channel comes from Jonathan's line of exceptional Malinois. He's also put PSA 3 titles on 3 dogs, Uzi, Cougar, and Puma, with there only being 29 PSA 3 dogs in the world, and founded his own PSA club, Strong Island Working Dogs in Long Island, New York. His hard work and dedication to training was recognized in 2017 when he was awarded PSA National Champion. In addition, he works with behavior modification cases, trains personal protection dogs, is a certified police canine trainer, and has helped many teams around the country. Jonathan also trained and handled explosive detection dogs for the Israeli government. When he's not training dogs or traveling around the world giving seminars, you can find him designing and leather making. He crafts custom leather pieces, collars, and training aprons for private clients. Please welcome Jonathan Katz. Thanks again for joining us on another episode. I'm here today with professional dog trainer Jonathan Katz, and we're going to be talking about the most important things that every dog owner should know about the remote training collar. So thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm really happy to be here.
And so you've been working with dogs professionally for, I think, over 15 years, right?
I'm going on 19 years.
19 years, that's impressive. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience right here. And the remote training collar is something that people really want to learn about. They want to have that off-leash freedom, off-leash reliability with their dogs. And you've had an incredible amount of experience with this. What are some of the things that people should really know and understand about the remote training collar? Can we just jump right into it?
Yeah, so to me, the remote training collar is the best device ever created for communicating with your dog, but it can also be very harmful if not used correctly. So it's very important that when we introduce the dog, because we don't have those verbal communication skills, meaning that we can't have a conversation with the dog, right? We have to show the dog through body language. It's very important of how we introduce the collar and how the dog associates the collar. If we use the collar as punishment, when you put the collar on the dog, they'll act mopey, they'll be bad. If we use the collar as a motivator, they'll actually enjoy it because they'll almost perceive their remote collar as a leash, right? Every dog, you pull out your dog's leash and they get excited at the door, we're going for a walk. That's how I want my dogs to associate the remote trainer, right? It is their leash, meaning that I don't put leashes on my dogs. My dogs haven't been on leash in years because I don't need it, right? I go out and I do demos and use my dogs for dog distractions. Honestly, I don't even put their collars on them. And people ask, how do I get my dog to be off leash like that? And I say, the remote training collar, right? It's about about conditioning behaviors, meaning that it's not the remote trainer that controls the dog. It's the behaviors that we've conditioned the dog to perform. And the e-collar just creates consistency and perfect timing, right? Dogs have 1.3 seconds between cause and effect, which is such a minute period of time. But the ability to reach out and poke the dog in a second and get that dog's attention is so important. It can save your dog's life. So when it comes to introducing the collar properly, we have to take a slow and steady approach and give proper communication. If we go too fast, we'll end up making mistakes. Slow and steady wins the race. The dog's not going to be off-leash reliable in a session or two, but with 3 weeks or a month of proper conditioning, we can definitely have the dog off leash. And reliably, that whenever we call the dog, because it's for safety, we call them, they come back to us. And then at a more advanced level, we can actually stop the dog and have the dog sit at a distance, right? We're calling the dog to us, and let's say, God forbid, a car's coming. We can tell the dog to sit, and we can reach out and actually poke the dog on the shoulder. Dogs don't have the ability to multitask. A dog can only think about one thing at one time. And then dogs also have auditory and visual exclusion. Dog owners all the time tell me, oh, my dog's ignoring me. And I say, well, are they ignoring you, or are they staring at something very intently? and they're not hearing you because they shut off their ears to heighten their eyes, right? But it's the same thing as calling someone's name. They're preoccupied, they're distracted, but then you call their name and you poke them on the shoulder and then you go, oh, and then they hear you. It's a physical touch paired with an audible tone of our command, and it creates that consistency right away of not only can they hear us, but they can feel us at the same time.
I like that you said that it's like tapping them on the shoulder, and it made me think of something else as well, an experience that I had. I had my dogs at the park, we're playing, having a good time, and some guy walks up to me, crosses his arm, looks at my dog and says, "Is that a shock collar? I train dogs the real way." And I said, "Oh, you train dogs the real way?" And I said, "So you're telling me the remote collar taught my dog this? Sit, down, stand, spin, heel, center." And he was like, "Oh, you're a trainer, huh?" I'm like, yeah, a remote training collar is not this terrible device. As you said beautifully, it's a tool to communicate very clearly, but most importantly, it's also safety.
100%. And it can save the dog's life. So, people are apprehensive to want to use the remote training collar, which I totally understand. It can be a really scary because it's so easy to communicate that it's just as easy to communicate the wrong thing. And when I first started, I was terrified of them. It's perfectly natural to be terrified of something that you could potentially make a mistake on, right? It's like when I first started riding motorcycles at an older age, I've only been riding for 4 years. I'm 39. I started at 35. Like, I was apprehensive that I've done so many dangerous things in my life. I get bit by dogs for a living. I'm not going to let this thing be the thing that's going to kill me, right? So I took it slow and I learned over time, and I graduated into feeling confident over time as opposed to expecting too much too quickly. And that just goes for all dog owners. Everyone expects their dog to pick things up right away. And it just doesn't work that way, because dogs learn through timing, consistency, and reinforcement. Like, we have to do anywhere between 50 to 150 repetitions just for the dog to start to understand the behavior, right? When I tell owners, like, okay, how many, you have to do 150 sits for the dog to understand sit. Well, that sounds like a lot. It's actually not, because if you break it up over each day, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, you do 10 sits per session. In 15 days, you're getting your stuff in, and you can condition that. And it's the same thing for the e-collar. We have to go slow because we want the dog to have proper responses when they feel the stimulation. And the key thing is that when we put the collar on the dog should never make a sound. Meaning that when the average person goes to PetSmart and buys an e-collar with no trainer involved, they usually press the button until the dog feels it, and then that means that it's way too high. We don't, as humans, without proper training, have the ability to read the dog's body language of when they're feeling it, because it's literally as little as just a minute. The dog goes, "What was that?" It's almost like a fly landing on the dog, right? It would almost like, you might like try to swat it away. It doesn't painful. It didn't bite you, right? It's a little annoying. But once we teach the dog how to turn that annoying thing off and come to us and get the reward, right? For us to pet them, love them, give them cookies, whatever motivates your dog, we want them to come complete the behavior and come to us because we're safe zone, right? If my dog is next to me, I can keep my dog safe. Now, with that said, I want my dog to be able to roam and go on hikes and have all this freedom. But that e-collar gives me the safety to understand, to know that at any moment I can reach out and touch my dog, right? Think about before we had cell phones. You didn't know, God forbid, something happened. You didn't know that, something happened at home, or you had no information. You have to go find a payphone, check in. Now with cell phones, we have immediate communication, and that's basically what the e-collar does. It gives us that immediate communication, which is just it's so important for that timing of training.
And how does somebody go about getting started with the remote training collar? I actually have a few people who have been waiting for me to put up a video on introducing the remote collar, which I haven't been able to get to yet. And so it's sitting at home, it's in the box, they want to start using it. Even without having a trainer right next to them to show them what to do, what could somebody start doing right now to at least build that strong positive association to the remote collar? Or at least how do you like to have your clients and people who come to your training seminars approach that process?
So without the guidance of a professional trainer, the first step I would tell people to do that they purchase their collar, now put it in their hand and very slowly turn the dial up, very slowly until you feel it. You should know what the stimulation feels like before you ever put it on the dog, because you should understand the communication and how they're going to respond to it. Now, if you put it in your hand and you turn it up and it hurts, it's too high. It's literally, when I do, every owner that works with me, they have to feel the collar before I'll put it on their dog. If they refuse to feel the collar, I refuse to train with them, because if they're willing to do it to the dog, they have to be able to feel it. And it's the main thing is to show them it's not painful. It's just really annoying. So we put it in our hand and we slowly move up. And I'll tell people, like, you'll have a lot of times you won't even feel it in your palm. So we use the palm because the skin on our palm is more like the dog's neck skin, as opposed to our skin on our neck is more like the skin on the dog's stomach, right? Our neck skin is more sensitive, their stomach skin is more sensitive, whereas their neck, dogs were bred to have collars on and harnesses and all these things. They have all these muscles and thicker skin. So we put it in our hands so we can have that feeling that the dog will feel. And we basically just slowly go up until we feel it. Now, everyone's going to be different. Everyone has different levels of pain tolerance. And when I use the word pain tolerance, because it's your body recognizing something. It's your body telling you that it feels something. You put your hand over a hot stove, the nerve endings in your hand tell your brain to move your hand away, right? So the whole idea is we barely want the dog to feel it. It's just supposed to be annoying. And we turn up until we feel it. Now, some people feel it. I usually feel the average collar, I would say between like 14 and 16 is the lowest that I feel it. And then I can probably put it in my hand till maybe 20, 30 before it starts to become really annoying. But I have put the collar in my hand many times and turned it to 100. And all you'll see is just my entire arm flex, because all it is a muscle stimulator. It's just like a TENS unit that we use for rehab. I have a really bad back from training protection dogs and police dogs for so many years in the bite suit. And I use a TENS unit to flex my muscles, and I'll turn it to the highest level and it loosens up my back, right? It's the same sensation that the dog feels. So first we want to get accustomed to pressing the button, feeling it in our hand, understanding how this device works before we ever put it on the dog. Now, the first step of putting it on the dog, again, like I said before, I want to make it a positive experience. So I'm going to put it on my dog and I'm going to play ball with them. I'm not going to even bring the remote with me. I don't need it. I'm going to give them cookies. I'm going to put their collar on and give them a bone. I want to create a positive association with the collar, as opposed to, oh, you're being bad, let's put the collar on you. Now, with that said, oh yeah, all I have to do is show them the remote, right? Which I've heard 8,000 times from clients, and I go, okay, I'm happy that he's listening, but I don't want him to listen because you're holding this remote. I want him to listen because you gave him a command and he's listening to you. People that do use the collar in that way of put the collar on the dog when the dog's being bad, it will work, but only when the dog is wearing the collar. So I always associate the e-collar as training wheels on a two-wheel bicycle. You want to learn, we start out with tricycles, right? Then when we go to a two-wheel, we start out with training wheels, and training wheels are adjustable. First, we have them all the way on the ground. Then we slowly start raising them up to help us learn our balance. Once we learn our balance, we take them off. So the goal of the e-collar is actually to remove it. The goal is to not be reliant on it. Now, with that said, I can walk my dog through Times Square off leash with no e-collar, and I have no questions in my mind that she's going to do anything wrong. She's going to not listen to me. She's going to listen to me perfectly. But I'm going to have an e-collar on her for safety. because God forbid something happens, I can control my dog, but I can't control my environment. So I what to say that another dog doesn't come over and try to attack my dog, or people don't come over and try to pet my dog when I didn't ask them to, or whatever the case may be. So I have the e-collar on for safety, but the goal is to eventually remove it in the house because the dog listens well, and then to have it in your pocket and not even really need it. It's like, you know, like carrying an antacid with you just in case you got some heartburn, right? Like, I know there's a chance. I'd rather have it with me than not.
Yeah, and something I tell people every time I take my dogs out, if I'm taking them out to play fetch, go on a hike, we're doing something fun, the collar goes on first. And I almost can't even remember the last time I actually had to use it. It's just there, it's on them. I still have the remote with me just in case I do need to use it. In fact, it was probably about 3 weeks ago. I was at a local field and we were finishing up playing fetch, doing a little bit of training. And as we were heading back, there was a stray dog. And I called my dogs into heel. They both got into heel position and we walked back to the vehicle and that was it. I didn't want that dog to approach because I didn't want anything to happen. Of course, I don't know that dog. It could have been a neighbor's dog in that area. And at the same time, I didn't want my dogs running over to the dog because I didn't know that dog. So even though I didn't have to use the correction or the remote collar in any sort of way of communicating, often when we train this way, as you were saying, our dogs kind of develop that habit of doing what we ask them to do, almost to the point where regardless of what's going on in the environment, they'll still listen. But it is important as a responsible dog owner to have that there, just like people who have their dog trained well on a leash. Their dog may never pull, but they still have the leash on because they're supposed to.
100%. Yeah, just trying to create habitual behaviors. And, it's like, you want to eat healthier, right? You start to do it, and the more you do it, the better you get at it and the easier it gets. And then before you know it, you don't even have to question what you're eating. You just know what you're supposed to eat and you know what's right for you. So it's so important to create those consistent behaviors, as opposed to the way that I was traditionally taught, just like you, was to use a leash and a collar. Now, when I went to dog training school for my first course, we had to have a dog off leash without the use of a remote training collar. We could only use regular on-leash training collars, 6-foot leashes, tab leashes, and then like long lines, 20-foot, 30-foot, 100-foot lines. And we had to do that in 3 months, have a dog fully off leash. Well, when I graduated, they said, well, now go and learn how to use remote training collars. And I said, wait, you could have taught me how to do this easier the whole time. And they said, yes, however, we want to teach you traditionally so that when you then go and learn the easier techniques, it just makes your life easier, but you always have that foundation to go back on. Now, the average dog owner doesn't need all of that, right? The average dog owner just wants to enjoy their dog. And part of enjoying your dog is your dog being well-behaved and listening. So I don't need to sit there and teach them 5 weeks of leash handling skills when in 5 weeks, I can have the dog fully off leash with a remote training collar. And if they can use their cell phone, they're more than capable of using an e-collar, because usually it only has 3 buttons, whereas my phone does 8,000 different functions, right? If you can use, I've taught little children, I go, can you use the TV remote? And they go, yeah. I go, okay, I can teach you how to train the dog.
And I have a question. When we were talking about introducing the remote collar and creating that positive association, do you base it on a certain amount of time? Let's say 1 week, 2 weeks of doing this, or do you base it on each individual dog? I would imagine that often it's easier to present something black and white when you're working with people who are not dog trainers. Like, hey, do it minimum 2 weeks. Do you have a certain process you like to follow with that?
So, yes, it is dog to dog case, but if I was going to give a blanket statement, I would say 2 weeks. Right? So, okay, so it takes 21 days to change a behavior, right? So, 2 to 3 weeks. Typically, after 2 or 3 weeks, you show that dog a collar and they get super excited and it starts sending all this dopamine in their brain of like, oh, okay, I'm going to do something fun.
And people,
So I would say about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
I agree with that. And people often want to rush training because they want to get that final picture. They want their dog to look like your dog. And what I always say is stop looking at it that way. It's not like you're training a dog for a client that you have to get done in 3 weeks or a month. You're training the dog for yourself. But more importantly, it's really about developing that strong relationship and giving that dog everything that they need throughout their lives. So like with you, I know you continue to train your dogs all the way up until the point they just physically can't do it anymore because they love it so much. And it's that opportunity for them to work with you. And it's, you know, something makes me think about when I would do a stay and train and I do the go home lesson, the owners are always like, it's amazing how the dog looks at you. And I said, yeah, because the past 3 weeks we've been talking. We've been communicating with each other. The dog's like for once, oh my gosh, this person understands me. And if people just look at training more so as an opportunity to communicate with their dogs throughout their entire lifetime, now 3 weeks, 2 weeks seems like nothing. And it's worth going through that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, God willing, the dog's going to live for 15 years. What's 2 or 3 weeks?
Right, exactly. So now they have the dog excited about the remote training collar. And when you look up remote training collar training online, what you often see, and you already hit on this a little bit, they'll say like, oh, put the collar on, hit the continuation button, and then turn it up until the dog does a reaction. Okay, good. That's what I want to see. How do you approach it?
So once we've found the stimulation that we feel, then the next step would be to find the lowest level that the dog feels. Now, the dog is going to have what I call their baseline, which is the lowest level that they feel, but it is usually not necessarily a level the dog will respond to. Meaning like you hear the little ringing in the house, but it's so faint that it doesn't make you get up and figure out what is the ringing sound. Then the next level that we would find for the dog is the level that actually makes them get up and look and go, what is that sound? What am I feeling? And then we pair that with a leash and we show the dog how to turn off that pressure. So dogs have what's called opposition reflex. When you pull a dog pulls away from him. When you push a dog pushes back into you. It's why every dog pulls on leash. It's the reason why we can connect a 35-pound pit bull to a harness and it will happily pull 3,500 pounds because of that opposition. So I don't like to condition my e-collars paired with a prong collar. I use a flat collar, something comfortable that I can apply a little bit of pressure on the neck and it's not going to hurt the neck. And I can actually guide the dog into turn and come in my direction. So because we're using it as negative reinforcement is the removal of an annoying stimulus to create and shape a desired behavior. It's before you get in your car, you start driving and you don't turn your seatbelt, you don't put your seatbelt on. Right away, every modern car is going to go beep, 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 beep. The only way to get that annoying tone to turn off is to reach over and put your seatbelt on. It wasn't full. It was just annoying, but you had no decision as to when that started. You only had a decision as to when it stopped by you performing an action. So I guide the dog. I tap the dog. So I don't use continuous for about 90% of my training. I like to use momentary because I can pretty much just like poke the dog on the shoulder. Now, when I'm working with my clients, I want to be able to give them as much information as I can. So let's say I'll say, okay, tap, tap, tap. It means I tap the button 3 times. And then the next behavior, tap, 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 tap. Okay, I had to press the button 4 times there. This time, tap, tap, I only had to press it 2. So I'm giving them that information, whereas with continuous, you hold it down, you would have to then start counting in your head per seconds of how long did I hold the button down? Because also the timing of doing this, when the dog starts to perform the behavior, automatically my finger can come off of the button because I'd have to reinitiate it. By holding down continuous, the dog could start coming to me and I'm still holding it. And then I have to take my finger off because when it comes to come, The stimulation stops when the dog makes the decision to come in my direction, not until the dog gets all the way to me, right? So it's like, mom told you to go clean your room. You went there, but you kind of, you did like you didn't do that great of a job, right? So now you go back, she makes you go back and she makes you redo it, right? And she's going to sit there and stand on top of you while you do it, right? Whereas if you condition it properly, okay, go clean your room. And then when you're done cleaning your room, I have fresh baked cookies for you, right? So it depends on what the dog's motivated by. Every dog is tactile. Every dog loves affection. Words of affirmation, right? They don't necessarily understand what you're saying, but they understand your tone. Good boy, that's a good girl, right? So when the dog comes to us, we give them a lot of love. So I'm going to annoy you until you come to me, but then when you come to me, I'm going to love you, right? I'm going to annoy you into loving me, right? But the idea is that the dog understands, oh, okay, if I come to you and I stay here, I get nothing but love and affection. Every time I go away, you're going to annoy me until I come back. From there, now we create what I call like safe zone. Is the dog learns, oh, okay, stay in my vicinity. You'll get nothing but love and cookies, and I'm not going to tap you. You'll feel no stimulation. Then the next point is now the dog won't leave your side. And clients will call me after week 1 and they go, I can't get the dog to leave me, meaning I can't even press the button because the dog won't. I said, perfect. I'll see you, tomorrow, and I'll come back and we do the next lesson. And now we teach the dog to then go to their bed or climb or place, or whatever you're going to call it. Okay, now, first the collar means come to me. Now the collar means go away from me. And then at an advanced level, the collar can also mean go left, go right, go backwards, right? So because it's a non-directional stimulation, it's not like a leash and collar that when I pull it, the dog feels it in a direction. The dog just learns to associate it with the sound of our voice, so it doesn't pull them in any direction. It just teaches them to listen and perform the conditioned behavior.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's 2 things that you said that I love. That's one of the best analogies I've ever heard about negative reinforcement. And it's a great way for people to understand it. I also like the fact that the negative reinforcement in that example was sound. Often people think that it always has to be physical. And it's like, no, just like with positive punishment, it doesn't have to be something physical. It could be a loud noise. We're still adding something to the equation. If the dog sees it as punishment, it's punishment. And then anytime something's taken away, I'm definitely going to be stealing that from you and using that analogy. I also like the tapping as well. So from what I've always heard as far as implementing the remote collar as negative reinforcement, it's been the continuation button. Now, when we use the continuation button, it does do a tap, tap, tap kind of feel, but doing it manually, I think that's brilliant in so many ways. As you said, it's easy to keep account of what you're doing to transfer that over to somebody else, but it also prevents the more common mistake of holding it down for too long. I mean, that is excellent. So now you have it to where your clients, the dogs staying next to them. Now we're working on getting the dogs to go away. What are some additional tricks that you use for the communication with the remote collar?
So what I like to do is a lot of times just, like I'm going to teach them the place. I'm going to lure them with food and I'm going to bring them onto the place. I don't want to initially tap them to get onto place, because I don't want them to perceive that like awesome spot, like their bed, as something bad. So I might take them with a treat and lure them or guide them with the leash onto the bed. And then when they go to get off, just like I always call it like, remember when you were a little kid and you played the game, The Floor is Lava?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So every time they go to get off, we just tap them and guide them back on. And then they end up going, oh, so if I just lay here and just relax, like everything's good. And you go, yeah. And they go, okay. And they end up going to their bed and just laying there. Right. And as a professional dog trainer that, I train all different genre of working dogs and pet dogs, but on the pet side, just being able to live with a dog, we can displace about 90% of all negative behaviors in the house by using plates. Because how can he jump on the counter if he's laying on his bed? How can he bolt out the door to chase the mailman if he's laying on his bed? And it's so impressive. People come to your house, like you call the DoorDash guy. He comes and you open up the door and the dog's just laying there, and he's like, he's not going to move. And I go, no, there's no reason to move, right? So it's so nice. First, I taught him to come to me because number one, most important command that you can teach your dog is come. Sit doesn't matter. Down doesn't matter. Place doesn't matter if your dog doesn't know come, because come will save their life. Now, with puppies, what does everyone do? Their puppy runs away and they chase their puppy. Well, that turns into chase games. And the dog goes, ooh, this is fun. Well, I teach my puppy to chase me. And I have had it actually save puppies' lives because we teach them to chase us. I had a client when I was living in Chicago, was walking their puppy down the block. The leash popped off the dog and the dog started bolting towards the street. And perfect instinct, he turned around and just started running away down the block. And the dog go, whoa, daddy, where are you going? And came and followed him. And he was able to pick up the puppy. Like, think about from cause and effect, from like life happens in an instant. And God forbid, bad thing, like accidents can happen in an instant, but little things like that can do so much. So we teach the puppy to chase us. Now it's the same thing with the remote collar. I'm always backing away from the dog. Come follow me. Come chase me. Come and meet me here, right? As opposed to me going to them. They have to come to me to come and get the reward. I'm not going to come to them and pay them. They have to come to me to get their payment.
That's something that is real common too, where people instinctively want to chase their dogs. And it's not a natural thing to go, oh, if I want the dog to come to me, I need to run away. I need to go in the opposite direction. Something I always say to people is just keep in mind, whoever's the one being chased is in charge of the game. And then, of course, another mistake people make is when the dog does run away, let's say in their backyard or something like that, they're getting frustrated because they're late for work. The dog finally comes to them and they correct the dog. And then they wonder why. Yeah, exactly. They wonder why the dog doesn't come back to you next time, right? Exactly. Why would the dog? It's like, oh, if I come to you, I'm punished. Same thing with, let's say a dog has somebody's shoe in their mouth and they're like, give me the shoe, and they're fighting to get the shoe back. And the dog finally lets go of it, goes, okay, here you go. And then they correct the dog. And then the dog goes, wait, you don't want me to let go of the shoe? So next time, hold on to the shoe more? It's those things about communication, which, training dogs for a long time, it's almost at a point, well, pretty much it is, it comes naturally. But a lot of these common mistakes, it's important to address them and bring them up so people know what to do.
Oh, for sure. I always say that humans are the only stupid animal that will come to someone when they're mad at them, right? So like your mom's like, you get over here right now. And you're like, and you come over. Whereas when you're mad at the dog's like, okay, I'm going to be over here where you can't touch me, right? Or you can't be mad at me. I've had it happen before where, God forbid, the dog got out and I chased the dog to catch the dog and I finally caught the dog and all I did was give them love. My instincts tell me like, oh, you should tell him he's bad. But my training tells me, no, tell him that he's good because I was able to catch him and he was safe. It's hard to go against instinct, but if you think about it that way, it makes them want to come to you even more, right?
Yeah, definitely. Something that I was talking about in one of my live Q&As the other day. I was telling the group that was watching, I said, when you're training your dog, no matter how difficult it may seem to teach your dog a behavior or whatever your dog is doing, think to yourself that your dog is trying the best he or she can to learn what you want. And I said, even if the dog stops and starts smelling the ground, yeah, you want to get the dog back and get that focus, but don't think of it as, oh, the dog's ignoring me and smelling the ground. Think, maybe my dog has ADD and he can't control that. So let's get him back in and let's work with him. Let's not have the mindset where, oh, the dog's just ignoring me or the dog doesn't want to do it. With all that being said, I do want to talk a little bit more about the remote training collar. What other information, tips, and tricks that you can provide?
So one of the first questions I ask people before we start using the collar is, do you by any chance play an instrument? And some people say yes, some people say no. Regardless, most people know what a metronome is. And a metronome sets pace. You'll see it sitting on the top of every piano. Duck, 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 duck. Now, even if people don't play instruments, I've never met anyone that didn't like music. And every top 40 song that ever was 100 beats per minute. Dup, 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 dup. Now, if you're into reggae or jazz, 70 beats per minute. Dup, dup, dup. And then let's say you're into electronic or EDM, dup, 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 120 beats per minute. So the pace that I like to use is 100 beats per minute. Listen, tick, 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 pay attention, right? And the whole idea is there is that split second between each tap to allow the dog to make the decision to perform the behavior. The reason why I'm not a huge fan of continuous for conditioning behaviors is I could potentially stim the dog for 1 or 2 extra seconds that I didn't actually intend to because it took me a second to take my finger off the button. Whereas if I'm pulsating, boop, 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 I can basically stop when I need to because I want the dog to understand the quicker you turn this off, the quicker you don't feel it. And you are in charge of your own destiny. So I'll have this happen a lot of times. I do lesson 1 and I explain, I go over the entire process. This is how we use the collar. We're not using it as punishment. This isn't do it or else. Because positive punishment, the application of a painful stimulus to decrease the likelihood of the behavior, which is like no, stop, don't. To be honest with you, I very rarely use the word no in my training because I don't really use any punishment. I don't use negative punishment much, which is withholding something the dog likes. And I don't use positive punishment. I use positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So I prefer the 2 motivators, the 2 reinforcers, to make my dog more successful because I don't want my dog to stop. I want him to do, right? And I want him to do it as quickly as possible because punishment is never going to speed a dog up. All it's going to do is slow a dog down. Negative reinforcement, the quicker I turn the annoying tone off, the quicker I don't feel the stimulation and the quicker I get rewarded. So I'm going to do things quick, right? So the example I use for people is the difference between a salary employee and a commission-based employee. The average dog owner treats their dog as they work on for salary, okay? What's your job? My job as a dog is to be cute, greet my owner when they come home, right? Play fetch with my owner, very basic needs. As opposed to think about like a police dog or a military dog or a service dog. A working dog works on commission. If he or she doesn't, the more they work, the more they get paid. If they don't work, they don't get paid. Now, what I do is I want the dog to think about the quicker I do, the quicker I make my sales, the quicker I go home. So if I could tell you that you have to sell $10,000 worth of dog collars a day, and if you sell those 10,000 in the first hour, you go home. You're done for the day. You met your quota. You're done. Now, you could do $10,000 sales, or I would just look for one person for their dog training business, sell them $10,000 worth of collars, and then I'd go home. So my training sessions are dictated by how the dog's responding to my communication. And the quicker that they learn to do this, the quicker they get the reward and the quicker that the session is over. So like I have a new puppy. My puppy, I'm looking for something in my training session that I can jackpot. I can give him an entire handful of food and I could tell him that he's the best puppy in the world and then training's over because I'm just trying to teach him something. But he does something that I love. I want to make it such a huge, big deal, right? You do really well on a test and mom and dad take you to the store and buy you a toy as a reward, right? They don't then make you go home and study more, right? You can study later, but for right now, let's make this a reward experience. I tell my clients when you're doing the e-collar, 10 to 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. I don't want you doing more than 15-minute sessions, and I don't want you training the dog more than 3 times a day. Now, that's not including working on everyday behaviors like calling the dog to you in the house and things like that. I'm talking about designated, I go out and I do a training session because I want to keep it fun. I want to keep it interesting, keep it exciting. I had a client one time called me, and I tell every client, I'm blue in the face, 10 to 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. It's part of the spiel, right? And I had a client call me and she goes, my dog's checking out. And I said, in that 15-minute period, your dog's checking out? She goes, no, well, I'm training him for about 45 minutes to an hour. And I go, no, he's checking out because he's bored, because this is no fun anymore, right? It wasn't like, oh, cool, mommy's gonna or daddy's gonna do arithmetic, like this is like, oh, great, we went on to algebra and I'm over this, right? And I said, no, 10 to 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. And she said, oh, I was trying to do extra credit. I said, it doesn't work that way. Dogs are about time under tension, meaning like as many reps as you can get. It's not about, like, okay, how many times can I lift this barbell? It's not about, I'm going to lift the barbell and hold it up for 45 minutes, right? We want to get as many reps as we can to make the dog successful so that they understand the behavior. So I can get my 150 reps in, but it's still exciting. It's not boring, right? When training becomes boring, I always feel, because I spend most of my year traveling and training trainers and helping people with their competition dogs and helping service dog animals and other trainers, like I want to keep it fun and exciting. If I ever feel like I'm bored, I always feel like the dog is bored and the dog owner is bored. And so, I don't have much attention. So I want to keep everything exciting, and it keeps the attention, because the dog's attention span is very short. An adult dog has max like a half an hour, 45 minutes of attention span. So when we do lessons, I'm going to spend an hour with the people, but realistically, we're going to spend about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes in the beginning, going over everything. And then we're going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes, recapping everything. Realistically, the dog trains for about a half an hour. When it comes to puppies, you're talking about maybe 5-10 minutes before they're like, oh, I want to go chase this leaf. Also, when we're using food, when we fill the belly, then, the desire goes away. If we go out, like, we had a great interview, we decide, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to grab a steak, and we leave the restaurant, we're full, and you say, okay, Jonathan, there's a taco shop down the block. You dance the hokey pokey and I will buy you a taco. And I go, come on, Nate, I'm full. I'm not dancing for you. Right now, if we're waiting online at the steakhouse and they're like, it's an hour wait. And I'm like, man, I haven't eaten anything all day. And you're like, dance the hokey pokey, I'll buy you a taco. And I'm like, okay, I'm dancing the hokey pokey. Right. So it's difference of level of motivation. The salary-based dog gets their bowl and their food every night, right? They get breakfast and they get dinner. It's always the same amount. It's always the same food, as opposed to the commission-based dog has to work for their food. Now, they might still also get salary at the end of the day. My dog will still get their bowl of food, but during the day, I'm going to make them work for it. And depending on how they perform behaviors, I'm going to pay them throughout the day, because I want to raise that level of motivation. If we don't motivate the dog, then they have no desire, right? You have to think about, do dogs love us? Yes, I think once you create a bond, a dog does love you. But to say that dogs love us off the bat, it's not actually true, because dogs are animals and they're resource animals, and we possess the resources. So you can say, okay, well, I have your food, right? Some dogs come in for training and they're not food motivated because they've always just been given food, right? Now we say, okay, well, now I'm going to make you work for food. And they go, well, my mommy and daddy don't make me work for food, right? And it might take a couple of days to them to understand, oh, okay, I'm no longer at a salary-based job. Now I work on commission. I just have to change how I feel about working, because everyone's got to get paid, right? And the dog has to be paid for what they're going to do. But over time, as you train that dog, as you spend time, you were saying before about the owners are like, well, I just want to get the dog trained and that's it. Well, actually, the training is part of that bond. It's that communication. It's when, mom and dad sat down with you and helped you with your homework, right? Those are those bonding experience of going over things, or that tutor or that teacher that you had that took that extra time with you to help you understand. That's all the dog knows is what you teach them. So you're that catalyst to teaching the dog. Create the best communication that you possibly can.
And as you said, trying to cram everything in one night is probably going to do more harm than good. And spreading it out throughout the dog's life. And if they're looking at it that way, then it's not a rush for perfection, but rather opportunities to bond with the dog. And like you were saying with the woman who's training for 45 minutes to an hour, yeah, that could definitely do more harm than good. In fact, when I was going through school, one of the biggest critiques that the instructors had against me, or towards me, I should say, not against me, was that I was overtraining. My dogs were shutting down because I came into dog training fresh from being in the military as a drill instructor. So my mindset was... Say what?
I said you're a really motivated guy.
Oh, yes, I really wanted to get it done. And I'm like, well, if they don't know it, I'm going to train all night until they have it down. And I was still able to pass. I did really well throughout the course. But if I was to do it again, I definitely wouldn't have been putting that much pressure on the dogs to try to learn so much in such a short amount of time. Well, this is about the amount of time we have for our session today. Are there any last little golden nuggets that you have that you want to share to my audience?
If you feel like you're struggling with the communication, find someone that can help you with that communication, because everyone needs a coach. No, there's never been anyone that's been successful in life that didn't have at least someone to help and guide them. And sometimes you just need guidance. When it comes to dog owners, some people need a little bit more help. They need things broken down a little more. Some people can go a little bit quicker. The skill set of a dog trainer is to be able to adapt their training from person to person and train the person and the dog in front of them. So if you're struggling, find someone that can help you, because like, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like, I just came back from a lesson and the owner was really struggling. We're on lesson 2 and she was able to walk her dog down the block, and the dog didn't try to go after and chase bunny rabbits and didn't try to rip her arm out of a socket to grab a duck. And she goes like, I was really struggling. I was even thinking about getting rid of the dog. Now, obviously she never would have gotten rid of the dog. She loves the dog to death, but that's where your brain goes. She mentioned to a friend of hers, who's a friend of mine, a previous client, that she's struggling. And she said, call this guy, he'll help you. So everyone needs a little bit of help. I've had coaches. I have multiple mentors. I only got to my experience level by putting in the time and effort, learning from the people with experience. So if you're ever struggling, just search for the right person to help you. And the key, like for me, a lot of the way to understand who is the right person, look at their dogs. Look about how their dogs respond to them. Look at how their dogs react to them. And that will tell you a lot of how the trainer is, because how they treat their own dogs is usually how they're going to treat your dogs and you as a person. So if you're getting frustrated, don't stop. Just say, hey, I need a little bit more guidance. I need a little bit more training wheels before I'll be able to balance on my own.
I couldn't agree more. And reaching out when you need help. I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been training, how long you've been working on something. I've said this before in some of my other interviews. There's been a few times where I called you up and we were talking about a dog issue or something. It's something that we have to do. Dave, I had a interview with him not too long ago, Dave Van Garter, and I still reach out to him. It's important to have these connections. Oh yeah, incredible. As are you. I've been able to learn so much training from you and learning from you. And something I want to provide my viewers is the ability to reach out to you if they're in your area, or how can they find out about your seminars that you've been doing across the country? And what are the seminars that you're doing? I know we were talking about it before we started the interview.
So I do a lot of competition training. I compete with my dogs in competitive protection sports. So a lot of people come to me for competitive sport training, but I also train service dogs. I do behavior modification seminars. Right now, I'm kind of focusing a little bit more on helping the e-collar community, helping the dog training and dog owner community communicate with the e-collar a little better, because I find that it's like there's so much information out there, but it's all kind of like so vague that it's hard to like really wrap your head around it. And the main reason that wanted me to start a YouTube channel was that I spend half of my year on the road teaching, and then I actually spend half the year like giving information away for free. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to give the information away for free, I think I should give it to everyone and not just that one person, because a lot of times that one person doesn't do anything with it, or they take it for granted, whatever the case may be. If I'm going to give it away, I might as well give it away to everyone, because I want to help dog owners as much as dog owners want to help themselves. And if it turns out to them eventually training with me, that's awesome. But if it turns out to them just having a better relationship with their dog, that's also phenomenal too. So I'd rather just, it's like Marcus Aurelius said, right? Like give it to the people, right? So for me, dog training is such a passion of mine. And I coach trainers from around the country. And, most of it I do for the love of the training, making the dogs better, and them, and if it turns into them bringing me out for a seminar, or, sending me a client or something, that's awesome. But the most important thing is that the knowledge is out there.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always liked to do, same kind of perspective that you have, and what was my mission statement still is, to improve the quality of life for all dogs by educating those that care for them. So I absolutely love that. I love that you mentioned Marcus Aurelius as well. I'm a huge fan of Stoic philosophy. I think I have about 15
books. Are you not
books.
Entertained?
Yeah, love Stoic philosophy. So where can they find you? I'm going to put all the information in the description of this video, but you have a website, or what sources to reach out to you directly?
You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is Katz Knows Dogs, which is KATZ KNOWSDOGS. You'll see a lot of dog stuff. You'll see a lot of leather work is my hobby. If you can't see, I'm in my leather shop right now. And it's just kind of fun stuff. Look out for when the YouTube channel's coming. I don't have a website, and it's kind of on purpose because I don't really have time to, work with all the clients that I have now. And the hard part about having a website is people are going to constantly reach out to you. And I just don't have the time to answer everyone just because I'm one person. And I find it really rude to reach out to a business and then they don't respond to you, right? So for me, reach out to me on social media, and I respond to everyone. But as stuff comes along, you'll see I post about my seminars and things like that. Most of the pet dog training I do is through word of mouth, because people that come to me have already trained, their friends or relatives or whoever have already trained with me. So they kind of understand. I take training very seriously. I have fun with it, but I take it seriously. And I refuse to work with owners that aren't going to put the time in. So, because it's a disservice to the dog, it's a disservice to me and my knowledge. So I like people to come that are already serious and really want to get things done, because that's like, if we're going to spend the time, let's do it right. Right. So, but yeah, definitely Instagram is probably the best way to reach out to me.
And you were talking earlier about one of your goals of setting up a school for professional dog trainers. Do you have anything right now as a resource for dog trainers out there that perhaps want to improve on their skills and their knowledge for the dog industry?
So that's where I'm like, the YouTube channel is going to kind of be the start of that. I do a lot of virtual lessons with clients, people, trainers or just private dog owners that I'm coaching from a distance, just because we have a limitation of distance. But I'm going to basically, my first goal is to give the information out for free. And then down the road, ready to actually open up a shop. We met when I was in Chicago. I had a huge training facility. I had multiple trainers. I had a ton of dogs in the kennel for training. And it ended up becoming into me just running a business and not being a dog trainer. And I quit being a chef to be a dog trainer because I love dogs. And so I had to get away from that aspect of the business so I could actually focus on the dog training. So that's the hard part about being one guy. But when I'm one guy, I know that I can get everything in my capabilities done, and the dogs are trained well, and everything goes as best as it can, right? As opposed to managing people and things like that. So eventually down the road when I'm ready, but my first goal is I want to give out informational, to the point, like almost how to, kind of for dummy videos, which can really help people be more successful and communicate with their dog better.
And you're an excellent instructor, the things that I've learned from you. So I know that this YouTube channel is going to be an incredible resource. Once you get it going, please let me know, because I'll post the heck out of it on my YouTube channel. And as I said before, hopefully we can get together and do a couple videos for my channel as well to send more people to your channel. Because of course, the more we can learn, and I say that as everybody watching, because everybody watching, even if they're not a professional dog trainer, they're a dog trainer, and we can continue to grow together. So
train your dog, you're a dog trainer.
Absolutely.
You're an amateur dog trainer, but you're still a dog trainer.
And that's what I tell people every time I work with them. So thank you so much, John. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, this was awesome. Let's do it again.